Today, the return of Viking Blood.
New and improved.
Yeah, I know. We've done Viking Blood before. We're doing it again. Here's why. I don't like that first video. So we're going to do it again. I've been thinking about how to improve it and make a better version. And since this is like the third iteration of it, it's okay.
This one is going to be fancified.
Yeah, that's just it. I'm not going off of the 1300s recipe anymore. This is a cherry mead that I decided to enhance a bit. Okay, so you're going to need 3 pounds of frozen cherries for this. I am using sweet cherries. Yeah, I am using sweet cherries. I know. The cough medicine thing. I know. Don't worry about it. We're actually getting rid of that by using other things. This is going to have more fruits added in secondary or conditioning phase that you won't necessarily see in this video, but it'll be in the follow-up video to this in just a couple of days. But there's other things that we're going to do that'll help mitigate that and make it taste really, really awesome. Bring out those cherry flavors. So the first thing I want to do is get some honey and water into my fermenter. For this recipe, I'm going to be using orange blossom honey, and we're getting it from Sweet Squeeze. There'll be links in the description below for that. I'm also going to be using my little big mouth bubbler. I actually really like these things. They're actually 1.5 gallons right up into the neck. They call it a 1.4 gallon. It's okay. We don't, unfortunately, have links for these. They're sold through Northern Brewer, though. You can go there and buy it yourself. Not a sponsor. Anyway, the reason I'm going to use that is because we're going to be putting all this fruit into a bag. And I want to be able to just pull that bag right out and still have about a gallon of product left once we get there. Now, on to the calculations for today's brew. I am using 6 packages of 8 ounces of the cherries. Okay, I calculated how much sugar was in the cherries according to their, ingredients and all that kind of thing. And it figures out to be about 4 ounces total sugar in 3 pounds of cherries. Now, that may surprise you. 4 ounces in 3 pounds. That just goes to show you, fruit doesn't have as much sugar in it as people think it does. When you concentrate those down, that's when you get a lot. Like your dried fruits and things like that have a lot of sugar in them. So anyway, that 4 ounces comes to 0.011 gravity. Well, my target gravity is 1.123 because I'm going to be using Lalvin 71B yeast, which is a 14% ABV tolerance yeast. If I've completely lost you, we have videos explaining all of this stuff, but I wanted to give you some of the calculations behind what we're doing today. So if my target is 1.123 and the cherries add 0.011, that leaves 1.112 that I have to make up for in honey, which comes to 3.2 pounds of honey. 3.2 pounds of honey. Here we go. Okay, now that we have our honey in, I'm going to pour some water in. And we'll start mixing this through. When you have honey like this and you're adding water to it, only go about maybe halfway up your fermenter at first so that you can allow for some sloshing around and really mixing it up good, okay? So about there. And to mix this up, as always, I'm going to need my spoon of unusual size. And we just mix. It'll take a little bit. The stuff's thick, and it's okay to splash around. You just don't want to splash out of the jar. That's why you don't fill it up. If you really want to pick it up and shake it, go for it, but this thing's heavy. So I tend to do this. There are various gizmos that you can put on like a hand drill and mix it up that way. And that's perfectly fine. I just don't ever bother with that. Probably because I don't think of it before we set up to film. Now someone might ask, what don't you like about the first video? Well, for one, I look about 20 years older. Going through a beard phase. I don't like it. I look back on it and I'm not thrilled. Also, there's a few things that I said and did that I'm not sure they're the right way anymore. And it's been a couple of years. Time for a revision. It's one of our most popular videos of all time. So we thought, let's make something good for 2020. Make a whole new version of it. And that way, that's the more modern version. So thus, we're here.
It was also filmed with an iPad.
Yeah, literally. Filmed with an iPad, edited on an iPad, too. Today, things are a little bit more up to sophistication level, you might say. I also used K1V1116 yeast in that one, and it's not my favorite yeast. Now, at the time, I didn't know because I'd never actually used it before. So it was the first real time trying that. And I chose it because of all the things that it said, but I didn't really appreciate it as much in the end because it had to go to a much higher level to get to the tolerance to be sweet. And there was a lot of finagling we ended up having to do with that. So I'm trying to make a simpler version of this that tastes better, sooner, and without as much muss and fuss.
But with more things.
But with more stuff in it. And things. When you're mixing honey, the easiest way to know if you're done is go till you think you are, and then go some more. As you can see, there's a little bit of foam forming in here. You can hear the splashing as I'm trying to talk. So that means we're aerating this just a little bit, and that's a good thing. We want that in the beginning. Now, as you can see, that just drips off. It's sugary water, not honey in water anymore. Well, I mean, technically it still is. Okay, next comes the cherries. And I wore my red shirt, so I won't get any on me.
And I wore my red shirt because I'm in the splash zone.
If you don't get that joke, you didn't watch the first video. I made sure to say it just the same way I said it there, which was kind of dumb, but I said it that way. Okay, so we're going to be using a bag today. I didn't do that in the first video, and I don't always use bags, but I'm doing it in this one because I don't want to have to change out the fermenter. So I'm going to try to fill this as much as we can, and then we'll be able to just pull this bag out next time when we go to rack. Now, when I say as much as we can, without, we're going to leave some headspace. So I'm just going to drop the bag in. It has been sanitized in
The red bucket of sanitization!
And what I'm going to do is ask Derica to hold the bag in place. And you might have thought I was going to dump this whole big thing of cherries and juice. I mean, check this out. Here's juice. I'm not pouring this that way. I'm going to ladle it in carefully. But Derica needs to hold the bag for me so that it doesn't slip in on it. See how much neater this is? This will probably take a few minutes. I'm going to just dump that juice in at the end there like that. Try to get as much as we can because the juice is what ferments. Now, you might be wondering why I didn't just throw those in, say, a blender or something like that. Because they were frozen. There's no reason to. Freezing and then thawing will actually break up the cell walls just as well as putting it in the blender, if not better. Cherries are in. Next, I'm going to add a cinnamon stick. Now, before anybody freaks out, because this is an antibiotic. It is a natural antibiotic, which means it'll prevent yeast and all that kind of thing from doing its thing. Well, sort of, but not really. A little bit. It also enhances the flavor of cherries really, really well, as we learned from our friends Gary and Susan Snow over at Tabletree Juice. They put a little bit of cinnamon into their cherry juice, and it enhances it like just a little bit. So we're going to do that too. And I'm putting it in with the cherries. That way it gets removed with the cherries without adding too much cinnamon. Now, this is one of those bags that you kind of have to tie. That's the only downside to this particular bag. The juice is already getting up into it. So, just like that, real simple, tie it. And then I'm just going to shove it in there. And now we're going to add some more water so that we get up to our marking there. She's getting daring. Pour in the water. Think about there, please. Stop. Yep. We wanted to leave a little bit of headroom for expansion. But this way too, I know we put in roughly a gallon of liquid plus the cherries. We should be able to get a gallon out of this. Because a gallon on this is about to here. So, you know what? You can add a little bit more water. You were right. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of stir that around a little bit, mix it all in. It's already a really awesome red color. That's what we like to see. The cherries might actually even turn white during the fermentation of this. It's just kind of a weird thing. So what I'm going to do now is take a gravity reading so that way we have an idea of where it is in the beginning. Yeah, it's a really, really awesome red color already. That just colored it right up. Okay, take that. By the way, in case I didn't mention it yet, Viking Blood is just another name for a cherry mead or a cherry melomel. That's all it is, and I'm going to get into that in just a second too. Okay, we're at 1.110. It's about 10 points away from the target that I actually had in mind, but I know we have other ways we can deal with that, and it's okay. By the way, my target gravity was 1123 on purpose because I wanted to go to the 14%, which lets me have a 1.103 gravity. That is 14% if everything goes dry, but I like it a little sweet, so we added 20 points, so 1.123. What I want to do now, though, is add in a little bit of extra nutrient for those yeasts in the form of yeast hulls. We've been using them a lot lately. We actually have a test that we did that you may or may not have seen yet. I don't know. Depends on how fast this ferments out. So I want to use those because they have been helping speed along fermentations. That's what we've seen so far. It goes a little bit faster. And I'm going to go ahead and pitch my yeast, which, you know what? There's a lot of stuff here. This might end up being a pretty high gravity. I'm going to use a whole packet of 71B. I got a lot of it right now. No big deal. So I'll put that in there. I'm just going to give this a good stir through, break up those yeast hulls. They tend to clump. We don't like that. Now, when I put out this first video that we did on Viking Blood, a lot of people had some interesting comments to make. First, I don't believe that Vikings would have ever named themselves after their own blood. That's just a weird thing to do. So this was done in homage to them, because also the timing for this is like the 1300s for the recipe that I had found previously. Obviously this is from 2020, but that one was from like the 1300s, which is about 100 years after the Vikings really weren't a thing anymore. So they didn't name it themselves, it was named in honor of them. Also, some people said that they didn't have access to cherries. Other people said that they did. Well, whether they did or they didn't doesn't matter because they didn't make this. They never made Vikings Blood, most likely, unless they had found cherries at some point. Then I'm sure they probably would have used them. Now, in conditioning, this is going to have more stuff added to it. So this isn't a true Vikings Blood anymore. So I'm sorry if anybody's really upset by that. But if you don't want to put the extra stuff in, you don't have to. You can totally just use the cherries, and it'll probably make a perfectly fine mead. But for this one, I wanted to do something just a little bit special. As you can see, I'm mixing this around. I'm squeezing the cherries a little bit, squeezing the bag, and moving the yeast and the yeast hulls around, trying to spread them through this, because when you have a bag, sometimes things get a little stuck, and we want to make sure that there's enough movement and yeast everywhere throughout this brew so that it can actually start up properly.
This is another thing I'd like to point out. When you're brewing with a brew bag and a fermenter such as this that's going to have an airlock on top, lots of times the activity and the volume of the bag will push the bag to the top, causing a bit of blockage for the gas to escape correctly in a clear path. So you may have more of a blow-off situation than typically would occur because the bag creating that blockage.
Yep. Last time we used it when we did the caramel apple bochet, we ended up having to use a blow-off tube for days because it just kept pushing up and pushing up, and I was just pushing that bag back down in. Why I didn't want to go too high on the shoulder here and leave not enough headspace. My biggest complaint with these big mouth bubblers is trying to get the threads on straight. And the seals aren't 100%. They are better than the plastic buckets that they, for us, replace. But if you're considering buying one, remember, it's going to take you a little bit to get it on there.
It looks like it's sanded.
Yep, and see, this is 2 or 3 times now. There we go. And once you get it started, it screws on for a lot longer than you think it should. And then you want to tighten it down really good. Now this time, everything was at pretty much room temperature, a little cooler. When you put hotter liquids in here, you want to make sure you check that seal a couple hours later when it cools down, because we found that actually, the expansions are different. All right, so we got here an airlock, and the bung that goes with this, it's just a cute little bung, isn't it? It's such a cute little stopper. And this is one thing I do like about these. The way the lid works, that stopper just goes right in. It doesn't push back out if it's a little bit wet. It's just literally a friction fit. It works. What's going to happen next?
It's going to sit
for probably a couple hours, and then we'll show you as it gets started up. Now, it could be an hour, could be 2 hours, could be a day. We don't know yet, and that's part of the fun of brewing. But
when it does happen, you'll be the first to know because we'll show you and tell you how long it took.
See you in a little bit. All right, so we're about 3, maybe 4 hours in at this point. And this was a little bit of a slow starter, but if you look, you can see there's bubbles happening. So we definitely have some sort of activity going on. Let me show you what it looks like inside. So as you can see, I mean, that bubble is forming. It's getting a little bit bigger. It's not super, super active, but it is active. That's what we want. And we're going to come down here and look at that foam. That foam is the biggest indicator of activity. And if I get down inside, maybe we can see some bubbling. You can see foaming coming up from all over the place. It's not super active, but it's working. That's the important thing. Yeah, and of course now it's going to be faster that I don't have the camera on it. It's like they know, you know. But the gist of this is now in a couple of weeks we'll remove the cherries and then we're going to do some other stuff. You will see that in part 2, which will probably come out just a couple days after you see this. That's our new system. That's how we like to do it. If you like this video, we have about 300 videos on mead, wine, cider, and beer making on our channel.
Thank you for liking and subscribing.
And as always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.